Hey, good morning. Today is Monday, and this is our science lesson. This week, you guys, we are going to be studying marine invertebrates. And I am super excited because this is one of my favorite couple weeks here when we explore some of the marine invertebrates that live in the ocean. And of course, because we live near the beach, it makes it even more exciting for us because we can go take a walk and see them for ourselves. So before we do that, though, I think it's really important that we take a few minutes and talk about how living animals are organized in the biology world. So with that, I want to talk to you about the classification system called taxonomy. That's what we call the process of naming and classifying things such as animals and plants into groups. So they do that according to the similarities and differences that those animals or plants or living things may have. We're going to be studying invertebrates, which are found in the kingdom animals. But scientists organized all living things in the world into 6 major kingdoms, and I've listed those here. The first one is animals, which are either invertebrates or vertebrates. Then we have the plant kingdom. The third kingdom is the fungi kingdom. This kingdom includes all of your mushrooms, anything basically that is not capable of photosynthesis. These are your decomposers. This is that group. The fourth group is your protist group. Those are organisms like slime molds, kelps, seaweed, algae, primarily microscopic, and they're called unicellular. They're made of only one cell, but they can form colonies. And they just don't fall into the animal, plant, or fungus category, so we call them protists. The last 2 kingdoms are the bacteria kingdoms. The first one is Archaebacteria, and then the last one is Eubacterium. The last one is found mainly in the intestines of vertebrates, animals, and in the soil. The last category is what we call the true bacteria. The group, though, the kingdom we're going to focus on again is the animal kingdom. Where do the invertebrates and vertebrates fit in? Well, 97% of all animals are invertebrates, and we classify those based on a couple different factors. First of all, they have to lack a backbone or a spinal column. They're usually smaller in size. Now, I say usually because there's always exceptions. There's something called the colossal squid, which is very large, but it's an invertebrate. There's about 30 or more phyla or smaller groups within this invertebrate classification. There are 6 major groups: annelids, arthropods, cnidarians, echinodermatas, mollusks, and poriferas. I already talked about the fact that 97% of all animals are invertebrates. And here's just some examples: insects, flatworms, jellyfish. The list goes on and on and on. Now, vertebrates have a backbone. They're always bigger in size. Vertebrates fall into 5 groups: fish, amphibians, reptiles, birds, and mammals. 3% of the animal species are vertebrates. And here's some examples: parrots, snakes, humans. We all have a backbone. I've posted this chart under the Science Resources folder. I like this because it organizes all the invertebrates without a backbone into the 6 major subcategories. We're going to focus on the 5 on the right. Annelid worms we're not going to focus as much on. The reason being, all the other 5 are full of marine invertebrates. Are you ready to talk about some spineless science now? This is an introduction into invertebrates. An invertebrate is basically an animal that does not have a backbone or spinal column. Hey, come back here. I'm not finished with you, bucko. You know what you are. Spineless. Did you hear me? Yes, our great jellyfish is one of the best examples of an invertebrate. So let's get started. Porifera is our sponges. Our next group is the mollusca. These are our soft and squishy bodied invertebrates. Then we have dermota. These are our spiny skinned invertebrates like our sea urchins and sea stars and starfish. Cnidarias, these are or have stinging nettles. These are all the corals, jellyfish, and anemones. And our last group is arthropoda. These have jointed legs, or pod standing for foot. These are our lobsters, shrimp, crabs, and all those insects. All right, let's take a closer look at the phylum Porifera. Some of the simplest reef animals are sponges. They live by pumping water through their spongy body walls to filter out tiny food particles. Their spongy water-holding skeletons are still used today. We use those as like natural bath sponges. The phylum Mollusca. They are classified by their soft, unsegmented body. So in this group, you're going to find a lot of the mollusks in the shallow seabed. Animals that do not have the internal skeleton with the backbone, many are mollusks. So you've got marine relatives of slugs and snails. Some are very snail-like with like a coiled shell and they have an obvious head and a tail. Others, such as clams and mussels, don't have heads or tails and their bodies are hidden inside like two hinged shells. Some of the sea snails have really decorative shells. Some sea snails crawl on their stomachs, just like a garden snail or a slug would do. Now, there's another group within this group that is called a cephalopod. And you probably are more familiar with those. And here I have several pictures of those. They have soft and squishy bodies, but these are your octopus, your squid, your cuttlefish. Those are called cephalopods. Now, I mentioned that the marine mollusks were pretty simple animals, but squid and their relatives, like the octopus and cuttlefish, are different. They are very intelligent. They're calculating, they have sharp eyes, and they're really good hunters, and they have really excellent memory. They even have long, flexible arms and tentacles, and that enables them to have some amazing adaptations when they hunt, swim, and for defense or even communication. Right along to the next group of phylum, it is the dermota. Now this group of animals have bodies that are basically star-shaped with a mouth in the middle. You'll see the starfish, this 5-rayed body plan is pretty obvious in most starfish, but other echinodermatas have it too. Do you see the spiny balls? The word echinoderm means hedgehog skin, and that really perfectly describes a sea urchin, which is covered with all those spines, but it's formed into a ball with like 5 segments. They also have this flexible tube feet that they use to move around and gather food. Some other animals in this category are your, let's see, sea urchin, sea cucumbers. The sea cucumber is the picture on the upper right-hand corner. All right, let's move on to the next group. This next group is called the Cnidaria group, or stinging nettle group. This group includes your jellyfish, your sea anemones, and even corals. Now, they all have something in common. They are armed with tiny stinging cells. They have soft bodies, but these jellyfish, anemones, and other cnidarians, they have these little barbed venomous, like almost like a harpoon. And when they touch something, that shoots out and pierces the skin of an enemy or injects it with venom. So it can be very painful. The upper right-hand picture is a man of war. If you've ever been swimming in the ocean and got stung by one of those across your legs, it can be very painful. Group is the Arthropoda, jointed leg group. In this phylum group, you're going to find your prawns, your lobsters, your crabs, even barnacles. Now, crustaceans is kind of another term that we use for arthropoda. They're an important group of marine animals in that they live in all the oceans, but are very common in our shallow coastal, like coral reef and sea area. They're known for their jointed, hard-shelled bodies, like those of insects on land, and they range in size from the larger lobsters and crabs to more the delicate shrimp like krill, and they all have that external skeleton with kind of like an armor that protects them. Most crustaceans have a body with a head and then the body segments and then several pairs of legs that are used for different jobs. One more interesting feature I wanted to share with you about the crustaceans, they all lay eggs. The eggs for crabs, for example, hatch as like tiny larvae that live in the open ocean. And then they drift in the plankton where they're fed alongside, where they feed alongside smaller adult crustaceans such as copepods. Okay, let's move on. The second part of this lesson, I wanted to challenge you all to a brain pop game. Now that you've learned some about the different marine invertebrate phylums, you're going to get an opportunity to play this game where you're going to sort tiles, marine invertebrate tiles, by phylum and characteristics. You're going to go to www.brainpop.com and then log in with your Clever badge. Once you get in, use the search bar in the upper right-hand corner to find the game called Classifying Ocean Life. Now, when you type in the search bar, make sure you type it in as 3 separate words, classifying, ocean, and life. Once you do that, the right-hand picture, that's what you'll see the first screen. It'll say Sortify Ocean Life, and you'll see all these various tiles. These tiles are a combination of invertebrates and vertebrates. Now you'll notice already that there's a blue shark, there's a mako shark, and a great white shark. Sharks fall under fish, and they're a vertebrate. You'll also see there's some mammals, a whale and a dolphin. Those are both mammals that fall under the phylum of vertebrates. So you will have a combination of invertebrates and vertebrates in this game. As soon as you tap onto a tile, this message will pop up. It'll say sort the tiles into your buckets. You have 4 buckets along the bottom of the screen. As soon as you click and drag a tile into a bucket, it'll light up and ask you to name that bucket. You will have 12 labels or choices to use to label that bucket. Now notice that some of the choices for labels have higher points than others. For example, when I look at the Eats Plankton label in the lower right-hand corner, that's worth 5 points. That means if I label my bucket Eats Plankton and the more tiles I correctly put into that bucket means every time I'll get 5 points for that tile. Before you start playing the game, there's a couple of vocabulary words I need to make sure you understand. The first one is called bilateral symmetry. Symmetry basically means something on one side is exactly the same on the other. It's symmetrical. It's equal and it's balanced. If I drew a line straight down the middle of this red crab here, he'd have a claw and 4 feet on the right side and a claw and 4 feet on the left side, as well as an eye on each side and so forth. It's bilateral balanced symmetry. The same thing with the butterfly here. Equal on both sides, like a mirror of each other. Radical symmetry means if I drew a line from the center going directly out in any particular direction, you would see an equal balance. A coral polyp has radical symmetry. A beetle has bilateral symmetry. But look here on the far right, a sponge has no symmetry at all, does it? Two more vocabulary words. Asymmetric. Asymmetric means having parts that are not the same or equal on both sides. So my little crab friend here, he has a very large claw on one side and a very small claw on the other. So he definitely doesn't have parts that are the same or equal on both sides. The term sissile refers to, for example, a sissile sponge or a sissile coral polyp. That means they're permanently attached or established. They're not free to move around or about. Let's go back to our game now. Here's the bucket that's labeled Eats Plankton, and that bucket and any tile that gets dropped into that bucket will be worth 5 points. Here I've labeled each one of my buckets, and you can see I've already dropped a few tiles into each of those buckets. Now, if you want to check how you're doing on any particular bucket, double-click on that bucket, and it will tell you what your game score is so far. Here, under the bilateral symmetry bucket, I have a total of 6 points. Now I can continue to play the game, or if you want to just start over, go to the upper right-hand corner and push the Restart Game button. Let's go over our to-do list for today. You just watched today's lesson video. After you're done, you're going to go play the Brain Pop game. I hope you have fun. Remember to sign in using your Clever card and use the search bar. If you want to print off the marine invertebrate chart, it's found under Resources, and that'll help you with the game. And above all, have a great time. One more reminder, my friends, we'll be using some Play-Doh in tomorrow's lesson. If you have a can around the house, go find it and have it ready. If you don't, please don't worry. You can complete the lesson without it. That's all for today. I'll talk to you all tomorrow in science class.